Jamie, does the Vice Premier, Liu He, actually have the authority to sign off on anything here, or are they just working towards some kind of skeletal framework, and then Donald Trump will meet with Xi Jinping, and that's when the real agreement will be ironed out?
So right now, they are in the process of seeing whether they can agree, and it seems as if, we don't know many of the details, but there is progress being made. And then it appears that, that President Trump and President Xi will meet at the end of March, and that's when, if there is going to be some kind of agreement, then that's when it would be signed.
But what about, you and I were talking about this in the makeup room.
Right.
What about the sticking points? I mean, you know, everyone has talked about the fact that it's unlikely that the Chinese are going to completely restructure their economy, opening up the Chinese economy to U.S. businesses, intellectual property rights, that sort of thing. I mean, Xi Jinping has promised his people a lot, just in terms of technology.
Yeah.
So how does the U.S. turn that around?
It's not just that. I mean, China has grand ambitions for being the leading country in the world by 2050. And they see the path from here to there as leading across the field of technology, of dominating the commanding heights of the 21st century economy. And they have their plan, Made in China 2025, that is about how they get from here to there. And so what we've seen is a lot of theft of intellectual property rights, a lot of forced technology transfer, and a lot of structural designs in the Chinese economy of how they move to that position where they would like to be. So the United States, if this is about deficits for the U.S., it's very easy for China to buy a lot of soybeans and liquefied natural gas. But the United States needs to make sure that they are getting...
the soul of their country.
So for the U.S., well, that's the thing. The United States needs structural reforms in China. And China will only make structural reforms if they see it as being in their interest. And they're willing to fight pretty hard to not make any changes that they don't see as necessary. And so that's why what's going to be difficult. And that's why having someone who's been as dogged as Robert Lighthizer in the U.S. on the U.S. negotiating side is kind of an asset at a time like this, because China has made multiple of the same concessions to the United States over and over and over, year after year, and then it doesn't happen, and they make the same concessions. So the U.S. seems to be saying, all right, if China are making concessions, how are we going to know that you're following through on your word? And if that doesn't happen...
So how do they know?
Well, they knew because the U.S. companies will either be forced to transfer their assets or not. There will be Chinese companies like Huawei and ZTE and others that will introduce products in the world with stolen U.S. code in them or not. So I think that is certainly going to be the challenge, is to say what are the proper metrics so that we can say, all right, either China is living up to its word or not. But China certainly has a very long record of a lot of promises and not a lot of living up to those promises.
Right, so when we look at the results of this meeting, it's not just about what is agreed to on paper, it's also about what is agreed to in terms of actual enforcement as well.
Absolutely, and that's why both President Xi and President Trump are under a lot of pressure. They both need to deliver.